Hey YouTube, this is a continuation of my vinyl collection series, and in this video I'm going to be covering everything I own in sort of the new wave section of my vinyl collection, which is much bigger than I realized actually. Now looking at it and pulling it out for the video, I have a lot to show here, even more than I had in my previous vinyl videos in punk and hardcore. And because I have so much here, I'm not going to spend as much time talking about the individual records so much as just kind of showing what I have. I think more so than almost anything else I own, this is a style of music that's easy to be a collector of, largely because most of these groups and most of the artists that release this music were signed to major labels, and their records were printed in mass in the late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of it's still easy to find in thrift stores and in record stores, obviously, as well as online, and you can pretty much find them for dirt cheap because of how available they are. Unlike punk and hardcore, there's not a lot of cachet in as far as how obscure or cool a record can be. I mean, with some exceptions, obviously, and I'll show the ones that cost me a little bit more. But yeah, I think there's a reason why this stuff is still out there pretty easily to find. Okay, the first record I'm going to show in this collection is Elvis Costello's My Aim Is True. Here's the back here. This came out in 1977, right in the thick of it, of British punk era. And Elvis Costello obviously has had a long career. He's done a lot of different things since this era. But, when he first started out, he was kind of a snot-nosed, new waver, punky kind of guy. He just had slightly more of a sense of lyricism and songwriting, and kind of a Bob Dylan-esque kind of wordplay that a lot of the other punks didn't, and he sort of developed that further and further and became more and more of a singer-songwriter as his career went. But this early stuff actually is still my favorite era, when there's a lot of keyboard, a lot of, fast, snappy drumming, and a little bit more attitude. This is a great record, by the way. I think kind of like a new wave standard. Just as Good is his second record, this year's model, and I bought these together at a record shop in Huntington Beach, not the one that I normally talk about. This was, I can't remember the name of the store, but it's sort of in and around over by the beach area, and it's primarily they sell for like sampling records and beats and breaks and that kind of stuff. It's a sort of a DJ shop, but they had a few crates full of old classic rock and new wave and that kind of stuff, and that's where I picked up some of these. But this is a good one as well. It came out in 1978. We have the Talking Heads, Speaking in Tongues. This would have come out in 1983. The lyric sheet is also the sleeve to the album. And this was a little further into the Talking Heads' career. I think they'd already released maybe 3, 4, maybe even 5 records before this. And this one has Burning Down the House, which was one of their first bigger hits, radio hits. So, this is a little bit further into their pop career. The B-52's first album, self-titled, and this is, I want to say this is like maybe one of the first albums I ever bought, alongside that copy of Nevermind the Bollocks from an older video that I did. This came out in 1979. This includes songs such as Rock Lobster. I suppose that's the only major hit on here. But the B-52s were Strange, Athens, Georgia band, who, you know, kind of played this kind of, I mean, everyone knows who the B-52s are, but, you know, they played that sort of, their sort of new wave style of like surf rock, punk. We have the Pretenders' first record. This came out in 1980. The Pretenders had been formed, I think, a little while prior to releasing this. And they sort of came out of the British punk scene, even though Chrissie Hynde was an American export. Lead singer Chrissie Hynde. And again, this is sort of a standard new wave classic. And, you know, because they came out of the British punk scene, they still had a little bit more attitude at this point and hadn't completely crossed over into pop. And so it's about, you know, you have your songs like Brass and Pocket and what have you, but there's also a few songs on here that are a little bit more punky and a little bit more garagey. And you get kind of both styles of what they were able to do. Not a lot of explanation here. Here's the Cars self-titled album. Rick Ocasek. I want to say this is 79, 78. A lot of Blondie here. Blondie's actually kind of a band that I didn't... Here, I'll just show the first one here. This is their self-titled album. Blondie's a band I didn't realize I liked as much until I started buying their albums. It started with one, then you go to a few record stores and you see more and more, and I just always pick them up. And then as I started listening to them, I realized how much I really appreciate the craft of songwriting this band was able to do, and how catchy a lot of their stuff is, and how sometimes somber their stuff is. Here's another Blondie record. It's Parallel Lines. This is the album that has Heart of Glass, which is not only one of my favorite Blondie songs, but one of my favorite songs, period. Certainly one of the best songs that have come out of the disco era. They started to lose favor with a lot of their punk rock CBGB's contemporaries for having crossed over with the song, but this is still a pretty great record. Blondie's Eat to the Beat. This is one that might be my favorite of the bunch. Like I was saying, sometimes they had kind of a somberness or a melancholy, especially in Debbie Harry's singing style. And this has some of my favorite Blondie songs, including Dreaming, which is one of those songs I think I put on every compilation CD that I give to people. Blondie's Auto American. And I believe this is the last one of theirs that I own. This was bought from Huntington Beach as well. Some of those other ones I think came from various places. Maybe Pepperland and Amoeba. The first Go-Go's album, Beauty and the Beat. This really kind of, I think, one of the bands and albums that signifies the beginning of the 80s new wave era. Says We Got the Beat, Our Lips Are Sealed, all their major hits. Still holds up, very catchy, new wave, almost sort of pop punk style. And I think bands like this get a lot of flack for not being punk enough or what have you, or for dating weird, whatever it might be that you might criticize them for. But I think what should be looked at for a lot of these groups is the songwriting and being able to write something that can still earworm as effectively then as it does now. And this album is pretty much perfect. Not as good as their first album, but still listenable, is Vacation by the Go-Go's. I think the only song a lot of people know from this one is Vacation. The Go-Go's Talk Show. This was their final album before they broke up. Kind of a fun background here. But yeah, things were starting to change and shift towards the mid-'80s, and I think their style of kind of bubblegum new wave was sort of not really in favor anymore, as well as all the pressures within the band and the attitudes and the rock star stuff that broke them up. A little beat up, but still plays just fine on the inside. Here is Joan Jett's self-titled or debut album, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. This is another record from that era that I think still holds up just fine. A lot of great songs. Crimson and Clover as another kind of mixtape classic. I Love Rock and Roll. Her cover of Little Drummer Boy, the Christmas song. This is another one that I think should be in just about everyone's record collection. Okay, a lot of these I found at thrift stores, like I said before, and bought them for under $1. This would be one of them. Men at Work's self-titled album. They're sort of an Australian one-hit wonder from the 80s. They did a song called Down Under. If you've never seen the video for that, they used to play that on VH1's pop-up video all the time. And if you've never seen it, I would suggest YouTubing it because it's hilariously obvious in the way that it's trying to line up every line of dialogue with exactly what's going on in the video. Okay, kind of moving away from straight new wave into synth pop, which is kind of an offshoot of new wave that was sort of going on concurrently. We have Boronsky Beats, Age of Consent. These guys kind of came out around the same time as the Eurythmics and Erasure and Depeche Mode, and they played a lot in that similar kind of synthy style, but I think these guys were a little bit more, in some ways, serious, and a little bit more kind of, had a bit more message behind their music. It wasn't all just party time, like, say, Erasure. I think the biggest hit on this album is a song called Small Town Boy. I've seen this record shown in a few other videos before, and it maybe doesn't date as well as some of those bands, but certainly that song is very good, and you can still find this pretty easily in a lot of stores, so I would suggest picking it up. Here is the Eurythmics, Sweet Dreams. Not a whole lot to say about that. Great album. Kind of a new wave, post-punk, and synth crossover group. We have New Order's Low Life. I think what this group is probably most well known for is being the spin-off group of Joy Division after Ian Curtis killed himself and ended that group. And this was, I think, their third or fourth record. Came out in 1985. And they were decidedly less depressing, a little less mechanistic and sort of cold as Joy Division, but they certainly had their kind of dark wave leanings as well. But they were not against writing a straight-up pop tune if they wanted to, and using a lot of keyboard and making a lot of dance tracks as well. Okay, and crossing into a little bit more of sort of the alternative rock, or sort of proto-alternative rock, indie-ish styles of British New Wave. We have the Psychedelic Furs. Mirror Movies is the name of the album. I think they're probably most well known for having a song on the Pretty in Pink soundtrack. Okay, and last of all, here's an album I was looking for a really long time. I decided if I wanted an album by this group, this is the one I was going to look for first. And this is The Head on the Door by The Cure. And this one I spent a decent amount of money on. I think this was, yes, about $25, which I've stated in other videos is about the max of what I'll pay for an album. But this has In Between Days on it, which is one of my favorite Cure songs. And this is one of the more kind of succinct albums. I think a lot of their stuff, even their best albums like Disintegrations, can sometimes be about 3 or 4 songs too long. Or an album like Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, which has a lot of great individual tracks on it, but doesn't play that well as an album. I think this one is one of their best, like, front-to-back, easy-to-listen-to pop records. Another sort of crossover, indie, alternative, goth, new wave group. Okay, and that is everything I own in my New Wave collection. If you have anything you want to say about any of these records, you can do so in the comments below. You can also see my other videos that I've made in my channel, both about movies, which is primarily what I talk about, and my other vinyl videos covering some punk and hardcore and post-punk. And I'll be back some other time.